Hello, and thank you for joining us for this Navigate Tuesday tip. I'm Pam, and today we're going to be looking at domestic violence and how you can assist those impacted by it. Increasingly, advocates and others are using the term survivor rather than the term victim, although legislation and some other things still use victim. It is felt that the term survivor better acknowledges the strength and determination of those who have endured domestic violence and the efforts that it takes them to rebuild their lives. There's also felt to be a negative connotation with the term victim. Doesn't mean that the term victim is illegal or that it can't be used. This is just kind of the direction that things are going. When you look at the numbers around domestic violence, there's some very critical things that pop up. Up to 60% of survivors of intimate partner domestic violence experience job loss at some point, and up to 50% of them are harassed at work by their abusers. So you can see here that there could be a significant impact on employment among the population of survivors. 38% of domestic violence survivors become homeless at some point, and 90% of homeless women have experienced sexual or physical violence. It's also worth noting that lower income levels correlate with increased domestic violence, although the mechanics of that connection are not really clear. When you look at gender impact, it's really starting to kind of change from what the traditional view has been. Traditionally, it's really been seen as male perpetrators versus female targets of domestic violence. But 22% of individuals of any gender are assaulted by a partner. Currently, there are higher rates among dating students and among transgender versus cisgender. And there's higher victimization right now for males than females in high schools. The lifetime rates are higher among women than men, but the past year rates are somewhat higher among men, and the rate of perpetrators is now higher among women versus men. Sexual orientation doesn't appear to have any significant impact on domestic violence, and it's worth noting that there is very limited data for non-binary persons or gender fluid persons and non-traditional relationships. VAWA, remember, protects all survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking. They do not have to be living in the same home. They do not have to be romantic partners. And it's not just women. It protects everybody. So the change in transgender guidance that we saw recently does not impact VAWA at all. It protects all survivors of domestic violence regardless of gender. Remember, VAWA has given us a great tool with survivors of domestic violence. It allows them to transfer. That's typically going to be done within the same community. But if you allow transfers to other communities, you need to put that in your tenant selection plan. And pilot programs exist that are making that easier. Massachusetts has one that has a central database that can identify units that are available and individuals wishing to transfer without publicly identifying their name, and allow properties to find units designated for victims of domestic violence so that somebody could transfer from one property to another. They're hoping to bring that program to other states, so keep an eye out for that. And you can give a preference for survivors of domestic violence. You just need to have that approved, and it needs to be in your tenant selection plan. Law enforcement is always an excellent resource when you're talking about domestic violence, and property managers should call law enforcement if there's an active issue where somebody is felt to be at risk or being abused. Other issues for contacting law enforcement are really going to go to your owner or agent policies. Remember that survivors do not have to have police records in order to have protection. but it can make it more difficult for you as a landlord to pursue eviction if you don't have police records. If you suspect that someone is being abused and you have an RSC, refer that matter to the RSC for follow-up and make all residents and applicants aware of VAWA and domestic violence resources. Be aware of HUD requirements regarding when you have to provide that VAWA notice, and make sure you are respecting an individual's privacy. Don't discuss domestic violence or their status as a victim with anybody that you're not supposed to be discussing it with, and make sure that documents related to VAWA status are protected in accordance with HUD guidelines. Another great resource is address confidentiality programs. Most states have them. This ensures that a survivor's current address is not easy to locate. The protections and the way to apply for this vary, so you can look up what your state requirements are by looking for address confidentiality programs. It's really important that we acknowledge that there is no shame in surviving domestic violence. A feeling of shame or a feeling that it's their own fault is common among those who survive domestic violence. You want to make sure that you are fostering at your community an environment where people feel safe asking for help and that you are acknowledging there is no shame in surviving. Let your community know how to ask for help, who to ask for help. Encourage disclosure of any safety issues to management. So encourage applicants to tell you, is there anything we should know about any restraining orders or anyone you're concerned with coming to the building? Encourage community safety efforts, like if they want to do a neighborhood watch or something similar. Ensure that all your residents and applicants know about VAWA and any other state laws that may apply. The best methods of getting this information out to your tenants is often a community posting or notice. Again, we talked about this when we were talking about drug and alcohol use, but always, always, always be concerned with safety. Do not release specific information about who lives at your property. Consider avoiding putting names by buzzers or mailboxes. Just use unit numbers. Stress security with residents. This is an ongoing issue that we all go through when there's a community building. Propping doors, leaving things open. Strongly encourage them to keep doors locked and not to let anyone in unless they personally know them and they have personally invited them to their apartment. Let them know that if they feel concerned, they should be calling. Don't wait for somebody else to call. If it's a concern for you, it's important enough to get somebody to address it. Biggest thing to note is never, ever, ever put yourself in danger by confronting someone who is armed, who is threatening, or who is doing anything that makes you fear for your own safety. Get yourself to a safe place and then call police if you need to, but do not risk harm by confronting somebody who is out of control. The hardest part for us when we're talking about this and some other issues is that we can't help somebody who refuses help. It takes sometimes years or generations to break a cycle of domestic violence. Sometimes domestic violence is mutual, where there's no clear victim or target, and that makes lease enforcement problematic and more challenging. Sometimes all you can do is just plant a seed. All you can do is let them know that there are resources, that there is help, and they can reach out. And it's very important when you're dealing with these types of issues to know your limits, to know what you can and cannot do, and to practice a little self-care. This can be very upsetting and emotional draining for property managers to deal with. So make sure that you are aware of how it is impacting you and be kind to yourself. Up on the screen now is the Domestic Violence Hotline. You can look that up online. There is help available in more than 200 languages. And they also have, of course, TRS and TDD numbers. There's a website, there's a text number. So there's a lot of ways that people can reach out. I would strongly encourage you to post something in your community that even just looks like this. If you or someone you know is a victim of domestic violence, here's where to get help.